Listen to what Bunny XO is teaching us about the mental health side of GLP-1 medication.
Just went through a bout of suicidal ideation from using a GLP-1, which I really think people need to talk more about this. I haven't had a suicidal ideation like this since 2020. That's how bad it was. I'm good now, but December was a rough month, let me tell you. I'm very open about it. I talk about it on the podcast because I just want people to know, like, yeah, GLP-1s are cool. I wish I could be part of the cool crowd and be skinny and freaking, not have a care in the world, and I actually need it. That's the crazy thing is I need a GLP-1 because both my parents had diabetes. So my insulin numbers are really crazy and my body just cannot tolerate it. I just want people to know, like, you're not alone. Like, everybody goes through ups and downs, and you are worth staying here. Please stay. Everybody, please stay, because you're here for a reason. And, you're going through this, but do not make a permanent decision based on a temporary emotion, because it will go away.
When you watch the video or listen to the video, I think it's pretty clear that she's not against GLP-1s. As a matter of fact, it seems like she really wishes that she could take them, and she understands, the clinical benefits of them, while at the same time highlighting the potential risks for some people. And in this case, that was suicidal ideation for her. Now, again, this is not a direct link. I'm not her medical doctor, but I think Bunny XO is highlighting something here that is something that I, as a clinical mental health counselor, have been speaking about now for some time relative to GLP-1 medications. And this is not something that is being spoken about enough, in my humble opinion. So it's important to, really qualify this and make sure that we're very clear, or that I'm very clear about what the studies do and do not show. So in animal studies, of course, it's a lot easier for us to be able to track, these things with animals than it is with humans. With animal studies, we have very, very clear clinical evidence of being able to really monitor the down regulation. Basically what that means is, the messages are firing, but they're maybe just not firing as intensely, of the dopamine neurons, because the GLP-1 receptor is, amongst other receptors, is on the dopamine neurons in specific parts of the brain. Okay, so when these neurons, fire, they're firing and they have different receptors on them. If one receptor is then activated and it causes the dopamine neuron to, not shut down completely. None of the studies show that it shuts down completely, so that's not what I'm saying, but just down regulates, that the messages of food noise are not as loud and not as intense, but the GLP-1 receptors are the food noise, but there's other receptors on those dopamine neurons, right? And so what other messages are being down-regulated or tampered down, or whatever the case may be, relative to those dopamine neurons? Now we can, kind of track this a little bit easier, visually with animals than we can with humans. But there's a number of different human studies, and I'm going to list them down below, where we can very clearly see from a behavioral analysis, as well as some neuroimaging, that there is a marked impact, a noticeable impact on reward circuitry, okay, and certain parts of the brain related to where these GLP-1 receptors are located. So I guess what I'm trying to say there, while making sure that I'm being very, very clinically precise, is to say that although maybe we don't fully understand all of the mechanisms of action, and although we may not be able to fully quantify just how much the dopamine is being downregulated, said non-scientifically, we don't know how much it's being lowered, but we're acknowledging that it's being lowered in animals and in humans. And we're acknowledging that we're seeing that behaviorally, right? Hence the reason why, if you're on GLP-1, many people are reporting that the food noise is less. And some people are even reporting just feeling less anxiety, because if those dopamine neurons were constantly firing very intensely, get food, get food, get food, get food, and now they've turned down, that's going to make us feel more at peace. That's going to make us feel more at ease. That's going to help our mind to feel less busy. So this is a hypothesis. I am not stating this, but let's just be transparent. Let's just have, as mental health professional, I feel that I have an ethical and a moral duty to bring this topic front and center, because in my humble opinion, it's not being front and center enough. So what happens for people that maybe don't have the food noise, but maybe have other clinical indications for why it is that they're taking their GLP-1, high insulin levels, or whatever the case may be? Maybe they're taking it for inflammation purposes, right? But they don't necessarily have the high food noise. But so maybe their dopamine neurons are not overfiring or firing very intensely, but now we're turning them down, or, there is an impact to that reward circuitry part of the brain. That, in simple terms, that can make people feel very dull, very bland, very, hey, where is the joy? Hey, this just doesn't feel good. Not just with food, but in what other aspects of life then? The reward circuitry is just not around food. It could be around other things. And by the way, I actually think that I'm not trying to be negative or pejorative relative to GLP-1s, because I actually think that there is a whole opportunity in the addiction space, and we're starting to see clinical evidence in that regard, that it can help to turn down cravings for alcohol. We see that in the animal studies. Cravings for alcohol and cocaine have actually shown to be diminished through the use of GLP-1 medications, okay? So I'm not trying to say that this is bad. I'm not trying to be an alarmist or anything of that nature. But what I'm saying is we now are having public figures coming out saying, hey, I wanted to take GLP-1 medications. They definitely could help me for certain reasons. So it's not that I'm like, oh, GLP-1 drugs are bad and stay away, right? But to talk about the very real impact that the medication they are reporting, I have to say that because I got to cover myself, right? That these individuals are reporting, in this case, Bunny XO, right? Is reporting was a side effect from the GLP-1 medications. And in my humble opinion, I want to be one of the first in the mental health industry to put it out there that if we are starting to notice an impact in reward circuitry parts of the brain, if we are starting to notice an impact in behaviors, well, where is that coming from? So we got behaviors are different. We got people reporting that food noise is less. We have, at least to some degree, neuroimaging showing that these parts of the brain are being affected. And we know that the GLP-1 agonist receptors are on those dopamine neurons and those specific parts of the brain. I think it's pretty safe to say that it's a solid hypothesis that there are psychotropic-like effects. And by psychotropic, I mean, drugs that are that we're taking for our mind, right? Not for our physical body. That's a very simple kind of scientific explanation. That these drugs are having psychotropic-like effects, that these GLP-1 medications are acting on the central nervous system. Again, that is not to be an alarmist, that I am not saying GLP-1 drugs are bad. What I'm saying is, if we've got animal studies, human studies, human behavior, enough people on the medication right now that are talking about, hey, the food noise is lower, then I think it's pretty safe to say that these drugs are having an impact on the mind, right? Just as much as they're having an impact on the body. Now, that's not bad, but if we're laying that out on the table, okay? And we're acknowledging that this has happened. That leads to one very important thing. We need to have a standard of care around mental, emotional, and behavioral health relative to the GLP-1 medication. So let me explain to you what I mean by that. In the clinical studies, they talk about lifestyle program or intensive behavioral and lifestyle programs. What these very often were in the clinical studies, not all of them, but in a few of them, were a monthly meeting, okay? A monthly meeting, for the participants on nutrition and lifestyle and everything like that. Now, I'm not saying that that's bad, that's good. Hey, the more education that we can do, the better. I'm saying that the standard of care needs to be higher. I'm saying that anybody that is taking the GLP-1 medication, we also need to be screening mental health wise, right? We also need to be screening and having the doctors checking in. Hey, tell me about these other aspects. What is your libido like? That's another huge part, right? What's your libido like? What is your drive? What is your motivation? What is your energy levels? And not just saying, oh, well, they're eating less calories, so they have less energy and less drive. Although that certainly is the case on or off GLP-1 medications, okay? But these are things that we need to be speaking about. It needs to be front and center, not back end conversations. So awesome. I mean, not awesome, Bunny XO, that you had those, effects, if it was in fact attributable to the GLP-1 medication that you were on. I mean, that's not awesome. That's sad. But I really honor the fact that Bunny XO is coming out and she's sharing, right? Hey, these were my side effects. I'm not hating on the medicine. I really wanted to take the medicine. I really see the benefit, but the medicine just didn't work for me. So again, right now, scientifically, we would call these anecdotal anecdotal type of responses where, the reports, right, where there's just not, quite enough information to, say that this is an absolute side effect. I think that the science is still out in that regard, but I want to push that forward. I want to push that conversation forward. I want to push it front and center. That is standard of care. So basically what that means is what the government, CDC, FDA, Big Pharma is saying, like, hey, these, doctors, hey, these need to be the fundamentals for anybody that's on GLP-1 medication, right? That mental and emotional and behavioral support needs to be a standard of care that needs to be individualized to the person. Maybe for some people, it's just an 1 hour kind of educational seminar. It's a pamphlet, right? They're aware of it. Maybe for other people, that's a monthly, counseling or monthly group coaching, right? Maybe for some people, it's more one-on-one. And this is not even getting into the fact that, in my humble opinion, for anybody that is dealing with any kind of addiction to food or using food as a coping mechanism, and trust me, I've had my own vices in my life where I've used drugs and alcohol as my coping mechanism, so I am not judging anybody out there that may have used or use food as a coping mechanism. No judgment from me. That would make me a hypocrite. I'm not trying to judge anybody. I'm just saying that if that's the case, let's use GLP-1s as an opportunity window where the food noise is turned down to get in there to do some of that counseling work, right? So, we can use it as a window for treatment. So I wanted to hop on here. I wanted to have this conversation because it really stood out to me that Bunny XO was coming out sharing this. And I've seen a few other MDs be asked about this. And the one just kind of brushed it under the rug. And I'm not going to name her because I don't want to, I don't think that that's supportive or collaborative or helpful to the conversation. But I will say this, I have seen MDs kind of brushing this under the rug. And as a mental health professional, as somebody that has worked for over a decade in the fitness industry, that has seen the ups and the downs and the goods and the bads and all of that can come from weight loss and nutritional changes and diets, okay? I have over a decade of experience of seeing how individuals have changed. I've seen people lose the weight and actually be, to some degree, more depressed or more upset because they lost the weight and thought that they would feel better, but they didn't. And that's related, I believe that's related to internal self-image. That's a whole other video. But, and then I saw people that lost the weight and felt great, right? So all I'm trying to say here is that there is a lot of different things that go into this. We're unique. There's over 8 billion people in this world, right? So there's 8 billion different minds and biochemistries and all of this stuff going on, right? So let's just bring it front and center. Like, good for you, Bunny XO, for bringing this to the table. If Bunny XO's post, right, or video or whatever, if she brings this to the table and it helps just one person to go to their doctor and say, hey, doc, I know we didn't really talk about this, or maybe we didn't really talk about this, but I'm starting to feel this, my libido is lower. I don't quite have the same drive. I just kind of feel kind of dull and kind of, numbed out, right? Maybe that's enough that it stops the process up front, right? So that it doesn't get, more serious. So anyways, I wanted to hop on because I saw this video from Bunny XO on Instagram, and to me, it's just yet another reason, okay, that mental health therapy, behavioral health therapy, lifestyle therapies need to be front and center from the MDs, from the prescribers. Front and center. If we're talking about keeping your protein high, if we're talking about mTOR activation so that we can stimulate protein synthesis, if we're talking about resistance training, okay? If we're talking about everything from here down, we should start talking about from here up. Because in my humble opinion, this and this are so interconnected, okay? So interconnected, we can't separate them. That's my humble opinion, clinically. I don't believe that we can separate them, right? So let's take the conversation from GLP-1s, right? Instead of just being from here with maybe a little bit of here, okay? Let's really dive into the here up. Let's have proactive, clinical-based, open conversations about it. And then let's talk about integrative, holistic, individualized GLP-1 standard of care. So, Bunny XO, my deepest empathy to you that you had been struggling with that as a clinical mental health counselor. I work with people, that are in both passive and active suicidal ideation. And boy, that's like one of the lowest points that we can be as a human being. So I empathize with where you were at, that it came to that point. And at the same time, I honor you and I thank you for having the courage to step up and to name this and to do it in a way that wasn't anti-GLP-1, but to simply say, hey, this is something that we need to bring front and center to the conversation. So thank you, Bunny XO, for doing that.